Tony's materials. And
Okay.
over that period of time, I was working, as I got more experience, as I got older, and I got educated, I became an electrical engineer. I went to college and I became an electrical engineer, and I started working as an electrical engineer. And I realized, as much as I loved electronics, I hated the bureaucracy of being an engineer. All I wanted to do was design circuits, and all they made me do was run down parts lists and stupid build lists and all kinds of crap, and I didn't want to do that. So I said, as I watched all of the people in my industry getting rich as salespeople, I said, that's what I want to be. So I transitioned into sales, and I joined a sales company for a 50 to 60% cut in compensation. And it took me 14 months to get to the point where I was making where I was before. But I didn't care. I was doing what I loved. I loved to sell. And then as I sold and as I generated more and more cash and I started saving money, I then realized that my true dream was to start my own company. And so I did. And I started Timeslips Corporation, which became the #1 software company in the world for time billing accounting software for lawyers. Now you might say, Mitch, lawyers are pretty boring. I said, yeah, they are. But let me tell you something. If you get on their good side and you produce a product they like, they're very loyal. And they were. And they made my company #1. And I grew that company to 100 people. And then I grew those sales to over $10 million. And then I sold the company. So now I am 40 years old. And I just sold my company. And I now have to move to Dallas, Texas to help the new owners manage it, get it set up, and earn it out. So I had to earn out my money, which I did. But while I was there, I only had to stay 2 years. They said, Mitch, why don't you run our company too? I said, okay, I guess so. Dallas is better than Boston in the winter, so let's give that a try. And I stayed for 2 more years, and I became the chief operating officer of Sage US. Sage was the company that bought us. And in that period of time, when I were building Timeslips, I met Chet. Now, Chet was a salesman. Chet called on me to try and sell me advertising. And that's when we became friends. And so after I sold the company, Chet and I remained friends. We talked every week. We debated the mysteries of life, if you will, as we both were on our own spiritual journeys. And that he invited me to come and help him. And so I did. And I came to help him, and we built a recruiting division. I built a recruiting division for him. And at that point, he offered me a position as president of the company, and I took it. And as soon as I became president, we began negotiating with this guy who I only had listened to his tapes, which was Tony Robbins. So every Thursday night, we get on the phone with Tony, Chet, myself, and Tony, and occasionally a lawyer, and we'd hammer out a deal to build a company together. And we did that. That's what became Business Breakthroughs International. And that's how I got there.
So do you have a wild story or a crazy story about working with Tony Robbins?
I got to tell you, I don't know if I could call it wild. I think what happens is that when you work in the presence of a true master, the amount that you learn accelerates very, very quickly. So I'm at this age, and the type of clients that I bring in right now, people don't pay me by the hour. They pay me for my wisdom. And I had the luck and of course the gratitude to be able to work with Tony one-on-one for hours upon hours, days upon days, to help create our company. And so all I could say is that the longer I got to know him, the more amazed I was at what an incredible individual he was. And the more I learned, the more I absorbed. Tony taught me things I would have never had access to before. So I don't know if I would call them crazy stories. We had a lot of fun together. Tony had generously invited me to all of his events, and I went to as many as I could. He invited me to his island in Fiji, and never got a chance to go to the island though. But I guess I don't have crazy stories. I just have stories of experiences with him.
Okay, so do you remember the day that you realized, like, whoa, this guy is pretty impactful?
Well,
like an aha moment. I think Oprah Winfrey likes to call it an aha moment, one of those type of deals.
I'll tell you one story about the first time we met.
Okay.
Now I'd been a customer of Tony's and had bought many of his training programs in the past. And I remember a difficult time in my life when I was going through a divorce and I had to take a business trip. I had to drive from Boston to, what was it? I think it was Albany. And it was going to be a long drive. So I took my box of Tony Robbins CDs and I threw them in the car. And I started listening to CD after CD, one after the other. And I had these very emotional moments where I'm basically screaming at the windshield because that's what you're supposed to do as part of the training. And I ended up after that trip, it was a cathartic experience. I mean, emotionally, it was draining, but it brought me to a new place just having listened to those CDs. And here I am now standing next to this incredible individual who has guided me throughout my life through his materials. Now, Tony, as you know, is a big guy. I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'6" on a good day.
How tall is he?
He's at least 6'8".
Okay.
I'm possibly taller, but I think he's 6'8". So here I am standing next to him, and if he puts his arm around me, it's like I'm about up to his mid waist. So I kind of look like his midget standing next to him. But here we are. We're in the lobby. We just launched our new product, new event. It's called the Ultimate Business Mastery Summit. And I'll never forget this because I'm standing there, Chet, Tony, and myself, and we're talking about strategy, about how things are going, about the sessions and which session to have next, when all of a sudden someone comes around the corner and sees Tony Robbins and says, excuse me, Tony, I just have to tell you, I love you. I want to thank you for all of the wonderful materials you produced. You've changed my life. And Tony, of course, is very gracious and says, thank you. And the guy goes away. So we go back to chatting. And then all of a sudden, someone else turns around the corner and says, oh my goodness, is that you, Chet Holmes? And Chet says, yes, it's me. And he says, Chet, I just want to tell you how much you've changed my business. We followed your materials. We studied your work. And, you know, my revenue is up 40% just on working with your materials. And of course, Chet said, thank you very much. And this guy left. I had that realization at that moment that what I basically was in the middle of was the heart and the head of the most dynamic business trio that I could ever be involved in. And so it was my job to be there. And that's when I had that aha moment. I had that aha moment that I'm now standing with two of the most amazing individuals in the world. And the gift that I've been given to be the CEO of their company was not lost on me. And I took that inspiration, that time, to do everything I could to grow that company. And with my partners, that's exactly what we did.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, this is you're listening to Mitch Russo, the author of Amazon's bestseller, The Invisible Organization, which we're going to get to in just a second. But from time to time, Mitch, this last question in regards to Tony is we have some of us believe, like, wasn't there a story of how he wasn't supposed to be that tall?
Well, Tony had and I don't know if I have this exactly right. Tony had an imbalance in his, I think it was his pituitary gland, and it caused him to grow faster and bigger than other kids. And it wasn't until they discovered this and were able to medically correct it that they realized that it was a problem. So Tony's size was the result of some form of either an illness or a condition that, if untreated, potentially could have killed him.
What age was that? When he was really young, or was that when he's an adult?
I think it was when he was really young.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this Amazon bestseller, The Invisible Organization. And we also know that the project that's, by the time you guys hear this, it'll be resultsbreakthrough.com. So again, make your way over to resultsbreakthrough.com. We'll also make sure that it's in the show notes. However, I do want to talk just a little bit because it's not every day or it's not every episode that we have an Amazon's bestseller on our show. So what is the Invisible Organization all about?
The Invisible Organization is a book that I wrote just after I left Business Breakthroughs with Chet and Tony. The book basically is designed to help CEOs take their existing company and convert it to a virtual company. So the tagline is how ingenious CEOs are creating thriving virtual companies. So the reason that this book was written is because people needed a way to understand how to move from being a physical entity to being a partial virtual or completely virtual organization. Now, the benefits of doing that there's just so many benefits to doing that. One of the benefits, of course, is expense. You're able to shed enormous amounts of overhead. And this is done regularly these days by airlines. For example, I don't know if you ever realized it, but if you called for a reservation to Southwest or JetBlue, then understanding that everybody you speak to on the phone is working from home. So they understood this. They were able to create this workforce that didn't burn gasoline every day, that didn't spend hours in the car commuting, that didn't require them to get dressed up to go to work. And instead, they let everybody work from home from their home computers. They put a VPN, which is a box called a virtual private network, inside their house. So it's about a $200 or $300 box. And that creates a private channel back to the company servers. And now anybody could work from home without any fear of their data being corrupted or anybody spying on them because of that VPN. And now companies understood that you don't need a building with 700 people on the phone to take these calls. And as I said, you also don't need a building, but you also don't need the expense of a building, the real estate taxes, the insurance, the electricity, the heat, the air conditioning, the telephones, the chairs, the modules, the elevators, and everything else. And you don't need a parking lot. And everybody who gets to work from home is grateful. Why? Because they just saved 2 hours of their life. They just saved the expense of a second car. Stanford University did a study, does working from home work. It's a 2014 study. And in that study, it shows categorically proven that there's a 13% increase in productivity of people who work from home. And sick days are eliminated. The rate of people quitting and taking other jobs is almost declines to zero at that point because people love being able to work from home. So the book was written to help people to guide that process so that they could take their company and create a virtual organization.
Is this large large organizations, small, mid-size?
It's any. I profile one company in the book that had a small architect business nearby where I live, 14 people. They saved like $41,000 a month by going partially virtual. That's for a little company, $41,000 of after-tax dollars is a pretty good savings.
Yeah, that is. So who amongst us, so you're basically saying if you have any type of business, if you're an entrepreneur, you probably need to read this book, and you need to read it for the fact that your business is probably going to expand. And when it does expand, you may want to get rid of those headaches. Employees. And is that pretty accurate or?
Well, I don't advocate getting rid of all your employees. I think there's a place and time.
Send them home.
Yeah, send them home. And there are going to be some times when you can't. Listen, if you're a dentist, you can't work from home. If you have a restaurant, you can't run it from your house. But your bookkeeper can work from home. Your advertising people can work from home. In other words, in every company, there may be an aspect that is required to have a physical presence. Mm-hmm. But there's also a big component of that can be sent home. I also profile a meatpacking company in New York City. Their company was expanding and they were running out of space. So instead of trying to move, which you can imagine is a very difficult operation, They simply moved all of their administrative people and all their salespeople, all their marketing people home. Now they ended up with 20%